welcome to GenFriends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson-Passy from Carolina Girl Genealogy. We've got a fabulous panel and a wonderful guest. So let me get started. We've got Bernice Bennett from GDB Roots. Hello, Bernice.
Hello, Cheri. How you doing?
I'm really, really glad that you're here. I'm glad that your schedule has changed and you're able to join us more often. I'm so happy about that. So I'm so glad that you're here. Yay! We've got Melissa Barker, our archive lady. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Always jealous of her archive behind her. Glad you're here. And we've got Jenny Hawran. Did I say it right?
You did
That's genealogy. Oh, that's my Christmas present to you.
I know, right?
Wait a minute, she hasn't said mine yet, so let's.
I haven't gotten to.
Nice to be here, everyone.
Don't do that to me, Shelley. And we have Shelley. Shelley Murphy, our family tree girl, is here. Hi, Shelley.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here too.
This is going to be a fun night because, y'all, our special guest is Scott Fisher from Extreme Genes. So hello.
Hello, everybody. It's so good to see all my friends. I mean, virtually all of you have been on the show at one time or another. It's great to see you.
Seen you at Roots Tech, and yeah. So we've had really fun times. Well,
yes.
The reason, I mean, we've always wanted to have you on the show, but when Melissa sent us a note saying, guess what I just heard? They're hanging up their podcast. They're done. They're hanging up the show. They're not doing it anymore after, what was it, 485 you just did the last one.
Yeah, 485 episodes, 10 and a half years every week. The thing about it is, and when I started it, I'm a radio guy. That's my whole career. I started it when I was 15
Listen to that voice. Of course you are.
Yes, listen to me. With a hand up to the side.
Exactly.
So for many years, but I wanted to do a national radio show on family history because it had never been done before. Yeah. And if you listen to weekend radio shows around the country, what do? How to fix your car, gardening, trimming your trees, right? Things like that, investing.
Right.
And I'm thinking, this is so boring. I would never want to listen to any of that stuff. And I thought, I bet we could do a really fun, interesting, entertaining, and educational show about family history so that people don't think it's just a bunch of old people sitting in a library looking at microfilms and the thrills of discovery and all those things.
Exactly. Yes. And you've done it, and you've done it well. You met your goal.
Thank you. Yeah, we got the first opportunity right in the same building. I worked for iHeartRadio. I was a morning radio host for over 30 years in the Salt Lake City market, but I've been on in other places around the country before that. And the talk show host said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea for Salt Lake City. Right?
Because they're the only ones interested in family history.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. The Mecca, though. So, we put the show together, gave him a demo, and he said, let's do it. So we got our first affiliate, and it took a while. The hardest thing is I didn't really know a lot of people in the community at that time. It was 2013. Yeah. And, I've been down at the Family History Library for years and years and years. And I got to know some of the people there because they well knew me from around town. We were the top morning show in town. They always thought it was really strange because we were known as being wild and crazy. And, we would do stunts and jokes and crank phone calls and interviews. We interviewed Paul McCartney once and Elton John. And it was fantastically fun. But they couldn't understand how somebody who would do that would go over and do this, And so I made a few friends among them, and they were among the first guests. But boy, every week it's just like, okay, who else can I find? How do I get another guest? Because you have to feed the beast.
That's right.
And it goes on and on and on and on. And over time, I'd meet a few more people, and they'd introduce me to a few more. And then Roots Tech was just getting started.
Yes.
And it was still pretty new at that point. So I got a booth in 2014. But then I found out, okay, I'm an ambassador. I'm trying to get guests. I'm trying to get sponsors. I'm trying to get more listeners. It was, a lot of work.
Yes.
So after a few years of that, I said, this just doesn't work anymore. So no more booth. And, but it was a lot of work because the challenge is that you have to fill the exact amount of time on the podcast every week.
Yeah.
And so I kind of figured out that if I did the show modularly, in other words, it's 5 segments, if every segment was exactly the same length,
Very smart.
then if I had a time where I was struggling to find a guest, I could go back and find a previous episode and say, oh, a segment 2 from that show will fit in here nicely. I mean, you look at 60 Minutes, you look at CBS Sunday Morning, great feature shows like that. They go back and play a lot of those segments from the past all the time, and they're great to see if you haven't seen them before.
That's right.
And you're not bothered to see them again because they're usually pretty good. And I'd obviously make sure to pick those that I thought were, really, really good for the listeners to hear again if it came down to that. And if I go on vacation or something like that, we'd run old segments. So, it's a lot of editing, a lot of managing guests, a lot of managing radio affiliates, a lot of managing sponsorships, and after a while, it's like, okay, I'm going to turn 70 next year. How many good years are ahead for travel? Things like that. And it's like, so, after 485 episodes and covering a lot of ground in 10 and a half years, I just figured, okay, what if we just pull the plug on the radio side and just do a periodic podcast on the podcast side?
Yeah.
So, that's it. But, especially last year, a lot of people know that I had a couple of blood clots go through my heart and into my lungs last year. And so kind of wakes you up and says, oh, okay, is this how you want to spend all your time moving forward,
Yes.
And so, yeah, I do want to spend my time doing genealogy and research and genealogy travel and lectures. That's great. But I didn't want the deadline every week anymore. It just felt like it was getting a little too much.
Yeah. And sometimes we know it's just time. It's just time.
Yeah, it was just time. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. Yes. A lot of ground.
Stories are never going to die. I mean,
No.
some of the stories from the show are just, how do you can't make those things up.
No, you can't. Exactly. Shelley, you have a question?
Yeah, will those shows randomly, the 485 randomly repeat, or will you just air them once you shut down, or it's just there and people still have access?
Oh, they're out there, Shelley. They're all these different places pick them up.
Yeah.
So
they're on YouTube as well.
Yeah,
they're on YouTube.
Yeah, I've got them on YouTube, but sometimes people just let them loop every week at the same time, and they're randomly airing.
Yes, and there's we're still working on some of that, but I don't know that that's necessary because the whole library is available.
Yeah.
And, so that sounds like more work, Shelley.
It does, and you can't do that. And I just started the traveling, and I'm 71, and I'm just doing the traveling. So I get it. I get it.
Yeah. So we're gonna, we were just in Europe last year. We were in Costa Rica.
So nice.
Yeah. And so
I did the Europe thing this year and last year, and we'll do it every year at the same time.
Yeah. Yep. We're going.
Japan.
Well, my daughter lives overseas, so we go see her while we have a place to stay. She's our tour guide for a lot of places.
That's what I did in Japan.
Makes it nice.
Normandy beaches were amazing. We're going to go to the Netherlands, my wife's ancestral hometown on her grandmother's side, and see the little villages that they came from. So we've been working on that. And we're even thinking of taking a Holland America cruise over there out of New York, go the opposite direction they did out of New York.
Oh yeah.
And go back to Rotterdam. So that could be
so much fun. So much fun. Jenny, you've got a question.
Yes, I'm always interested in the behind the scenes. So I know when you interviewed me, you called me on a certain night, and then it was just me. And I know you had a co-host, Dave Lambert. So how do you kind of put it all together? Did you have a certain night that you and him would do your bits? And how did that all? What was your week like putting together an episode?
Generally, the idea was we had to have the show posted for the radio side, in particular, by the Wednesday before. Most people in our space know that the podcast comes out on Mondays. So we would have it done on Wednesdays for the radio stations because sometimes they would have people who were getting ahead for the weekend. They would have to load their shows, and they don't want to be there on the weekend running it. They just load it into a system and they can get that. And they want to get it as early as they can. So Wednesday was pretty good. So typically I would record David and guests on Mondays and Tuesdays. And then I would edit it in the evenings or on Tuesdays, sometimes Wednesday mornings, and then edit the thing and get it up. So, it's like, it can take place anywhere in the first full half of the week. And, if something came up, my wife says, hey, you want to go play golf today? It's beautiful. No, I can't, got to edit. So it's but that's how the routine went for the last decade.
Wow.
And sometimes, we would get ahead and we'd record for the following week on a Thursday or a Friday, or I'd get way ahead. But, once again, it's just a matter of at some point it all starts to catch up with itself. And then you're back to, okay, what do I get this week? So it's a lot of work. But it was great fun. I got to tell you, though, this was not an easy decision to make in any way, because it's like, man, because you feel like you're letting your audience down. They've been with you for so long, but it's like, well, it's got to stop at some point.
Well, you could have gone at least to 500. Make it an even number.
That's like saying, well, you got to live to at least 90, a nice number.
They probably said that every 100.
Right, yes. That's true. People say, just a few more to go to 500. Is like, I don't know that I have 500 in me.
I have to say that you were a fantastic interviewer. I know that you do this as a profession, but anytime I was on the show, you were always so engaged and so interested in what I was talking about, and it just was wonderful. And the stories, you were always about the stories. And so that's why I love listening to the podcasts, is because the stories, they're stories you didn't really hear anywhere else either.
Exactly.
Oh, well, thank you. The challenge was with it all these years was, you'd get expert guests on. And part of the thing too with many of our sponsorships was we wanted to give them exposure. So we put their guests on a fairly regular basis. And a lot of the times what they would talk about would be their area of expertise. So we would want them to come on and talk about, something they can teach the listener about how to do. But at the same time, I also know there are a lot of listeners who may not have any interest in learning old German handwriting, right? So, and then this is kind of an extreme example because, a lot of it was pretty universal, but those things would come up. And so you'd say to them, like we talked about all the time, Melissa, is if you're going to give me a technique, if you're going to explain something, you have to give me a story of something you have discovered as a result of that you wouldn't have had you not done whatever it was you did. And so, people, I'd often call people and they say, oh, what do you want to talk about? What do I want to talk about? You tell me what you've had on your mind, what you've been blogging about, because if it's limited to what I'm thinking about, show's over in about 100 episodes, I go so far with that. But if they can, if I can tap into what all of you are thinking about, Bernice, you've been on many times and we've talked about things that you've done that I knew nothing about. I don't, I think anybody who claims to know it all in family history is fooling themselves and everybody else with them. Well, I don't know that you can fool people that way. We all know better.
Yeah.
And so I learned more than anybody, I think, from it, and got more from it and really enjoyed the journey. And like I say, it's not over. I'm going to go to Roots Tech. I'm going to get interviews and I'll put together I'll start my hobby, Extreme Genes.
There you go. That's great. Yeah. Laura just popped in.
Or a mini version.
Yeah. Well, this thing about it is like, okay, let me give you an example. We talked about the segments, the 5 segments. The first one was 7 minutes, 1 second and a half. The second one was 11:20. The third one is 9, and the fourth one was 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and the fifth one was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And there were reasons for this, and I won't get into it, but the idea was you had to hit certain points for commercial breaks that are automated on the radio stations. Podcasts, as everybody here knows, you don't have to worry about that.
That's right. You don't. Yeah.
So I would always record my segments 1 to 2 minutes, typically longer than I needed. so that I would cut out all the and the
Mhm.
pauses that people naturally say, and you would cram a lot more information into the same time period, and it would be clean. It wouldn't sound, we wouldn't lose people. They wouldn't fall asleep. The other thing when I started the show, I was always afraid of is I've heard people tell family history stories,
Yes.
and it can go on and on and on and not get to the point. And it's like, well, people say, well, why don't you do the show live?
No.
Are you kidding me? And we're just getting started and the segment's over. It's like,
Yeah.
I need full control. So, this is now that we have all of that stuff out of the way, I can just do a podcast. And if I want to sit like we're doing right now and just chat and let that out, that works for me.
Yeah.
I still want to be active in the community. I just
I'm glad.
want to be able to walk away when I want to be able to walk away.
Yeah.
That's
Perfect.
great. That's great.
Bernice wants you to tell a story. Ask him which story, Bernice.
Yes,
one?
tell us your Jackie Robinson story.
Yeah, it was you see behind me? You see behind me that it's full of signed baseballs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from another period of my life when I was growing up just outside of New York City. And I was a big Mets fan. I'm still a Mets fan, which is a very painful thing to be. Jenny, you live in Connecticut.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by people like me.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Red Sox fan, so it's even worse.
Yes, and Chicago Cubs fans. It's all this, the same thing, but at least the Cubs won something in the last 40 years.
Yeah, my son-in-law is big Chicago Cubs fan.
Yeah, and it made his life for 2016. So when I was a kid, I started to go down to collect autographs at Shea Stadium. I learned that I could go down by the railing during batting practice and the players had come over and sign your ball. And I'm like 13, and this was the greatest thing ever. And I said, these were my heroes, and they would have old timers days. So I went down for old timers day in, I think it was 1968. And I got Joe DiMaggio to sign a baseball for me. It's like, touching the gods. I remember it was summer vacation from school and I'm sleeping that night. I could hardly sleep. I woke up at 3 a.m, turned on the light and just grabbed that ball and looked at it because I could not believe that I owned a baseball signed by Joe DiMaggio and he signed it right in front of me. And so over time, we started going up to Cooperstown. A couple of buddies joined me and we started doing this together. And then when I was in college and I was working media, I could get press passes and go in the dugout clubhouse. And there was no money in the thing then, so nobody cared. So I go to old timers games. I got pictures taken with Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio later. And Sandy Koufax and, all these amazing experiences. And in 1972, I was a senior in high school. In April of that year, my father passed away unexpectedly. And I was 17, and it was a pretty bad time. 2 months before I graduated, and one of my buddies came over and said, this is about a month later, he says, I found out where Jackie Robinson lives. And he said, let's go over and get his autograph. And I'm thinking, this isn't a great time for that. It's just because my fear was, I'm going into his territory now,
Right.
And we're going to go over there and, they're probably going to chase us off or they're going to call the police for trespassing. I had all these fears in my mind. And he said, well, if you don't go, I'm going to go without you.
That was the dare.
Yeah, it was, it's kind of like the Christmas thing right now, double dog dare.
Yeah.
All right. So I said, but here's the thing. And this was, 50 years ago. So I said, all right. So here's what we got to do, though. We got to dress up in jackets and ties because that's what you did in those days.
Yes.
You looked nice for people. We didn't want to look like a bunch of bums, coming in off the street. Hey, is Robinson here? So my friend showed up on a Saturday morning and he had our other buddy with us, which I did not expect. I thought, oh, good, let's just bring 20 people, that'd be great. So anyway, we loaded up our stuff and we drove over to Stamford, Connecticut, where everybody knew Jackie lived, but not specifically where. But David figured it out, and we went down this gravel driveway and it had a circular end to it. It was a nice house. It wasn't, an extreme mansion like you would see with athletes today. It was a very nice home. And Dave, he was a friend of mine. He had a lot of courage, shall we say. He was just absolutely, he was fearless. He didn't care. We grabbed our stuff. I had a book that my dad had given me for Christmas the previous year on the history of baseball, and we had a ball, and Dave marches up to that door, and I'm hiding behind him like this isn't going to be good. And boom, 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 knocks on that door, and my heart starts going. And I'm thinking, this is terrible. And the door cracks open, and Mrs. Robinson pokes her head out and says, "Yes." And he says, "We're here to see Mr. Robinson," as if we had an appointment. And I'm just looking away like, I can't believe we're doing this. This is ridiculous. And so she says, "One moment, please," shuts the door. And so we're standing out there. This is in May of '72. And my heart's just pounding, and I'm thinking, am I hearing sirens? Are they coming for us? I was really expecting that. And then suddenly, 2 minutes later, the longest 2 minutes of my life, the door swings open and she says, "He'll see you in the living room." And at that point, my jaw about hit the driveway. And we walked down the hall, and the little video recorder's going in my mind. Okay, kitchen on the right, down the hall, 3 steps down to the living room.
Escape route.
Yeah, I mean, everything. And then over my right shoulder, as we went down into that room, I hear, "Well, hi, boys. What can I do for you?" And we turn around, and there's Jackie Robinson. And it's, this is like this iconic man has invited us into his home. Not only that, he had a guest with him that he was visiting with.
Oh.
So he asks our names and introduces us to his guests, which is crazy. "Well, what can we do for you, boys?" And my friend's like, "We want you to sign some things for us." He says, "Well, sure. What'd you bring for?" He says, "Sit down." He sits me down to the right of him on his couch. He sits our other friend over on the left, and then Dave's there. And of course, he's first one in. And then Jackie signed this book for me to Scott, "Best Wishes, Jackie Robinson." And he signed my ball that I'd gotten signed up in Cooperstown. "Oh, anything else I can do for you?" "No, sir, Mr. Robinson, thank you." I didn't think at that moment in my life, 4 weeks after my dad had passed, that I could feel any joy ever again in my life. But that day I did. And so we drove home rejoicing, all the way. There is a follow-up to this. I think you may remember, Bernice. I graduated high school the following month. And then in July, I was at an antique store in our hometown in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. And I found a 1955 Brooklyn Dodgers scorecard. That was the only year that Jackie and the Brooklyn Dodgers won the World Series. They beat the Yankees. And I bought it for like $7, which was pretty expensive in 1972 for a high school kid. And so I said to my friend, I said, "Man, I wish we'd had this when we went to Jackie's house." He said, "Well, let's go back."
No.
And I'm like, okay. So we did. And so we went back in July, went to his door again. It was just the two of us. And he came to the door himself this time. And in the 2 months since we'd seen him, the whites of his eyes had all turned yellow.
Oh.
And he said, "I don't see too well anymore, boys. Put the pen where you want me to sign it."
Oh.
So we literally took his hand with the pen and put it on where it was. And he signed "Best Wishes, Jackie Robinson." And then he signed my friend's item, whatever that was.
Wow.
And we left, and it's like, what happened to Mr. Robinson?
Yeah.
And he was our friend now.
Yeah, he was your
Yeah.
friend.
He was our bud.
Yeah.
And then I left for college in the fall, upstate New York, in Ithaca College, their communications department. And I remember when the news came out, he had died in October. He had, and it was from complications of diabetes. And when I heard that, it's like, oh, well, that explained it all.
Yes.
He was only 53 years old.
Wow.
you know, and
Very
his hair was
sad.
all white very prematurely. But that was kind of a life-changing thing, you know, to see
Yeah.
that kind of kindness to a bunch of kids. And especially, he didn't know my situation,
Right.
you know, and to treat us like that was just, you know, memorable, and actually got written up in a book called Sentinels Along the Way. This woman put together a collection of stories that people of some, you know, who are somewhat renowned have had something happened, you know, that changed their lives. And I wrote that up, and she felt it was the best story in the book. You know, I said, well, whether it is, it was one of the best stories in my life. And you know, I enjoy it. And you know, I have an African American grandson coming up here in June. I'm very excited about that. And I think he's going to be getting one of those signatures one of these days. So
Oh, wow.
Good.
Thank you so
Wow.
much for sharing.
yeah.
I will
Bernice-
never forget the story. So I say everybody needs to hear this story.
It's a good story.
It's a
Bernice, you
good
wanted to
one.
ask a question about the name of the
So how
show.
did you come up with the name of your show?
Yeah, that was hard because the vice president of programming at iHeartRadio, who was in our building, he wanted to be something that really explained what it was, that it was, you know, family history show, something. I said, no, it doesn't work like that. And I had to really think about it. And you go through a lot of things and you get some suggestions and some ideas. But I kind of had this idea in my mind because, you know, my mom was a liberal Democrat from the West Coast. My dad was a moderate Republican from the East Coast. They met filing for divorces in Reno, Nevada. That's where they had that's where they got together. I'm a miracle. And he convinced her to follow him back to New York. She was in show business. She'd been in the movies. She'd done radio in San Francisco. She had been a showgirl during World War II in
Oh,
LA.
wow.
And he was the music arranger for the Ed Sullivan Show, the Jackie Gleason Show, and later the Tony Awards.
Man.
And so they had a lot in common. And so he convinced her to follow him back to New York, which she did. And they continued to date there. And then they got married. And I and my brother were the result of that in Connecticut. So, you know, I remember talking to Mom about that. I mean, this is just crazy. And she says, well, let's face it, you've got extreme genes. And so I thought,
love it.
I liked it. And in 2013, when we started the show, the DNA revolution was just getting going. Really. I mean, it was along. It wasn't revolutionary at that point, but we hadn't had the big waves that came in 2015, 16, 17, right? In DNA. But we kind of rode that. I mean, as that wave took off, we had more and more things to talk about because, you know, we were all still learning what you could even do with it. You know,
some of us still are.
Well, sure, of course we are, but you know, for the more extreme stuff. But I mean, just the basics of how to use matches and
all
helping.
that.
I remember the first person I saw there. You know, they were adopted and identifying both parents for them. It's like this just is unfreaking believable. This is great, and it changed her life. And she met a half brother, and she met a half sister, and then there, you know, that's the yin, and then you had the yang. And I had to tell a neighbor of mine that her father, who she adored, was not her father. And this woman was in her 60s, and both of her parents were gone. And you know, we figured it out because she had a whole different set of cousins than she was supposed to have. And so we put that together. But you know, there's a lot of healing that gets, mostly, you know, the downside is far outweighed by the good side. But it was fun to, you know, ride that. And so extreme genes really fit the whole run of the show, I thought.
Oh, yes, exactly. What a great question, Bernice. That was perfect. What a great answer. Came from your mom.
Well, it was a long answer, but
no, but it was
because it's a podcast, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We're all good. We're all good. Laura, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Laura.
Hi, nice to see you. Congratulations on your freedom of activity.
Well,
Weekly.
like I say, I'm not cutting it loose completely. I can't ever do that. I mean, my life is made up of that. I'm working on 3 books right now as it
Yeah.
is, that I have to finish and do those things amidst all the other stuff. So, but we'll still be out there. We'll still do some things, surprise some people once in a while.
I do have a question for you though. Just I'm interested in your opinion of, because there's so much out there about YouTube and attention spans and stuff. What do you like about the long form interviews versus the short segments that we've become accustomed to?
That's an interesting question. Keep in mind, I grew up literally on the supported by the Ed Sullivan Show. And, I would go to the rehearsals and things, and my dad would introduce me to the Supremes or to some of the comedians that I wanted to meet. I met Tiny Tim.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. But look at the acts that he would have on that show, right?
Laura's going to start singing. Be careful.
Tiptoe through the window. They would have, the waltzing bear.
Yeah.
Right, followed by the juggler, followed by the Rolling Stones,
Yes.
followed by an opera singer, forever. And they were short, quick segments.
Yes.
The theory behind the show always was that, hey, if you don't like this act, stick around, you might like the next one.
Right.
And so my feeling is that a lot of things that are done long form, especially in our space, lectures and things can tend to drag on and put you to sleep. So my feeling was short segments, lots of different topics. Like if you look at the way we laid out the show, the first segment was always, well, what's news in our space, right? What are stories that are really interesting that are happening? What did Dave discover this week? What did I find this week that people might find interesting? And then we would go to guest segments. And most of the time it was 2 guests over 2 segments. Sometimes though, the stories needed more than that. We needed more time. So we would do the same guest for 2 full segments and talk about that material. So to me, I always like the shorter segments and move it quicker. So that, especially for the radio audience side, which is what my area of expertise is, that we can hold their interest, through the show. I'll tell you some funny stories about that, because when we first started out, people were really used to the intellectual way of presenting things, NPR, things like this. And I remember I was away from the booth once. I shook my chains at the booth at Roots Tech and left my son in charge of the booth and some other people. And I was running around meeting people, and my son told me later, he said, yeah, some guy came by and he says, yeah, I don't like that guy. He's way too happy. He's way too excited. He says, I like NPR.
Oh gosh.
And then the other one was, I got an email from a woman in in Washington State. And she said, I've been in the radio business for like 3 years. And I really think that you need to play some softer, more, high-end music. I mean, the guitarist on that, I own that music. The theme, I paid to have that made, so I would never have to deal with any of the rights and all that. That's, and the guitarist on there played with like some of the top recording acts in history, and my feeling was it had to show that the show was fun. It's going to be entertaining, that it's going to be energetic. And then the segments themselves also kind of had to match how that music sounded.
Right.
So that people can go, this is fun. And so I wanted to try to break that mold. And I hope I did that. It
reminds me a lot of the old, and I like to listen to old radio shows, 30s, 40s. And they had what they called variety shows. And on television, they had variety shows. And that's what it was. It was a variety of different things.
Yeah. And to that extent, this was modeled after variety. And because, what is family history? It's this massive thing, right? I mean,
it's a variety.
It is variety. And so I would try to bring as much to that as we could. So, and tell the stories of what people can find through either these techniques or going somewhere or meeting somebody or finding stuff online and where they can go. You know, one of the things that was always a shock to everybody, and I talked about it all the time, was all the things you could find on eBay that relates to
Yes.
Yes.
I love using eBay.
And I have to tell you that when you would talk about that, it made me start looking as an archivist, because I am an archivist at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives and Museum. Little plug there.
Yeah.
And I started looking on eBay for stuff for our archives.
Yeah.
And so now about every other week, something will pop up on my thing that I have set up to look for certain words and things. And just a couple of days ago, I got something in the mail, and today I got something in the mail, and it's things like an envelope that was postmarked here in 1908, or a business memorabilia piece of something, or a photograph by one of our well-known photographers here in our area. And I can purchase that, and I can put it in our archives, bringing it back to where it came from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are let me show you my little treasure that I just got 2 months ago on eBay. I hope you can see this all right. Maybe not, but it's in this little clear frame. I got for it. This top one is an invitation to a fireman's ball in New York City in 1860. It was a ticket, and it was issued by the fire department that my great-grandfather and his brother belonged to at the time. And my great-grandfather's brother's name is along the bottom here as one of the members of the committee that was putting it on. The bottom one is a lady's ticket to attend the same event. So, you know, I mean, look at
That's
this.
awesome.
It's a little fuzzy, I'm sorry, but
No, that's wonderful. And I think people don't realize how much
that
good
was just
stuff.
a tip, folks.
Yeah.
It was a major tip. And, you know, the way you do it is so simple. Just like Melissa was explaining, you put a search term in there like you normally would if anytime you go to eBay.
Yeah.
And you can click a little box, and it'll say, hey, anytime anything on this search term comes up, send me an email. So this particular thing was Rutgers Hose Company number 26. So, you know, you don't want all those terms in there because it might not match it. I just put in Rutgers Hose. About 12 years ago, I got an email after 12 years that says, hey, something matched that. And I looked at it and went, oh my gosh, that's mine right now. There's no haggling over the price. I bought it immediately, and it has been just really fun to own. And you know, to imagine that was, you know, and I couldn't even find anything in the newspapers online about this event. So this might be the only thing that still exists. It's only 163 years old.
That is amazing. Now, Shelley, Shelley wanted to ask you a question about guests.
Yeah. Well, before that, doing the eBay, just on a follow-up, I do a lot of research for Jefferson County, Virginia, aka now West Virginia. I put Jefferson in there, and good Lord.
You got to be careful.
So when you said what you just put in there, and I thought, because I undid Jefferson, and I said, I got to figure out a better way to get to the county and not to TJ, because everything in there, you know, whatever comes up under TJ's name. But anyway, is there someone that you would like to have interviewed that you couldn't get on the show?
Boy.
Might not even be a genealogist. It might have been someone connected to history or whatever. Was there somebody you wanted and couldn't get?
I was very lucky because we had a fair number of celebrities on the show over the years. The biggest one was Steve Young, the Hall of Fame quarterback. Who I knew when he was in college. I used to have him on my radio show in Utah after his home games, and we'd talk, and then he'd come over on Sundays and eat us out of house and home with a couple of his offensive linemen. So, you know,
send this to him.
after all those meals and years, we figured, okay, it's time to call in the favor. So we got him to come in and talk about his family history, because it's really quite interesting. Apollo Antonono came on the show, who was the Olympic speed skating champion. He was in the studio one day at iHeartRadio when I was down there. And for the first 7 years of Extreme Genes, I was still doing a daily radio show in Salt Lake. And there's Apollo in the hall, and he was going in to plug something he was doing locally because they do a lot of Olympic training in Utah. And I grabbed him and I said, when you're done there, I want to talk to you. And I took him into another studio, and he was fantastic. And just thrilled, talking about his grandmother and Japanese ancestry and how the things that he could look up over there. That was a thrill. I guess who would I have on if I, is that like
Lady Di or somebody like that?
What's that?
I said Lady Diana or somebody.
Lady Diana.
She wasn't
the Queen, maybe.
I would have loved.
Genes.
I did get to interview Paul McCartney once. I'd have loved to have had him on Extreme Genes because he loves talking about his father and the musical legacy that his dad brought to the family. And he's very easy to talk to. He's but I mean, he gets a lot of requests. So I didn't bother
I'm sure.
But there were quite a few. I'm really quite happy with how it turned out that way. I mean, you can only get so many, and you get a few at Roots Tech too.
Are you going to try to get one more person on for the last show?
No, the last show's done.
Yeah, the last show's done. It came out today, didn't it?
It came out. Is today Monday?
Yeah, it's the 18th. Yeah.
Came out
today.
The last one I heard was with Diane.
He's retired.
DNA.
When you're retired, you don't remember what day of the week it is. I had to set an alarm to make sure I didn't forget this.
Set alarm. I went back to work full time after retiring, so I understand. I run by alarms. Well, I was going to have a request if you were going to have one more show. Go get Prince Harry to come on. Talk about his family.
Talk about his family.
They may not have very nice things to say about his family.
Well, he just won a lawsuit, so I thought we could get into the family stuff. So,
well, see, I have to run out the radio contracts through the end of the month. So as we've always done at the holidays, we've run over Christmas and New Year's as a rewind show.
Right.
So we'll play a couple of the best shows actually of the year. One of I guess the show that I liked the most this year, these two guys I came across very early in the year, distant cousins to me, distant cousins to each other, eighth cousins, that kind of thing, ninth cousins. One of them descends from this common ancestor of mine twice, and I descend from that common ancestor twice. So I don't know what we are. But
you family.
He and this other cousin got deep in the weeds because it's their name line. It's DeWitt. The common ancestor was from upstate New York, Cheri DeWitt from the Netherlands, and was in Kingston and that area, part of settling along the Hudson River Valley. And they wanted to find his grave in the churchyard there at Kingston. And they couldn't find it. And they worked for years going back and forth to archives in Albany. And they learned some things about how the Dutch would mark their grave sites, that there would be like a wooden post and they would bury them along this wooden post. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. I wasn't. But they found this daguerreotype from the 1850s. It had a picture of where the gravestone of one of the sons of this immigrant had been. And the stump of that is still there, but the post was right behind it. Suggesting that this was where all of them were. Right. And so they had discovered things that talked about the order of the burial. They found a family Bible, and they got permission to dig them up. To do DNA. And they got, and so they now have my, let's see, I guess he's my 8th great grandfather, but on another line, he's also my 7th great, and his wife, and the daughter that I come through.
Wow.
One of them. So, and some other, I guess 1 or 2 others, and they're doing DNA on them. They're trying to establish the relationship between the various skeletons and establish, this is him. And they've already established the ages match. Wow. So they've got him.
So wait a minute. So you're telling me if I've got a brick wall and I need some DNA, I just need to convince somebody to dig somebody up. So
Well,
get
he was
some
actually
DNA.
in there in the grave with a shovel himself, doing it with several other descendants and with the permission of
Wow.
the church, because it's their churchyard.
Wow.
And there was a psychic that came around and told them things that were true
Oh my
about what
goodness.
they found in the hole. And then a tornado came by the first day of the dig. And I mean, it's insane. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, things started happening to the people who were in on that. We did a whole other show
Oh.
on that.
Oh, I've got to dig that up.
I know.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
I get the pun.
I got the
I'll-
pun too. She's gonna dig that up.
Oh my gosh. So
You're
here's
on
the
a roll
one guy.
tonight, Shelley.
The one guy's down in Louisiana, and a while back, a year and a half ago, he bought a Dutch coin because he thought it'd be cool to own a Dutch coin because he's of Dutch descent. It had nothing to do with the family,
Yeah.
anything like that. I would say from the 1790s, I guess, something like that. And he kept it in a safe place where kids couldn't get a hold of it and that kind of thing. And then one day he went looking for it and he couldn't find it. It was gone.
Oh.
And after the dig, this guy and several others, including the guy at the university at New Paltz, who's in charge of dealing with the remains, all started to have the same dream.
Oh my
With
God.
this guy talking to them in Dutch.
Oh.
And one of the other descendants, Name Line, who was part of the dig, who lives in upstate New York near there, he called down to Louisiana and said, "This is really getting freaky because Cheri came to me last night in a dream and he told me he was going to leave something for me to prove that it was real. And he says, I woke up in the morning and I went to check my messages on my phone and something fell over and I reached down and it's this coin from the
Oh, no.
1790s.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
Okay, we gotta find that episode and put the link.
I
in.
gotta find that
Yes.
episode. I want
Absolutely.
both episodes.
Just if you go to extremegenes.com and you search DeWitt,
DeWitt. Okay.
it will
I'll
it
find
should
it. I'll
take you
stick
to
it.
those episodes. So
Wow.
I mean, that to me was like, this is the greatest story I've ever heard.
And you know what? That's what's so great about the podcast, your show, though, is you got those kind of stories that we didn't hear anywhere
Yes.
else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we tried, did our
Yeah.
best, and hopefully they'll live on, and hopefully, we'll find some more. Those are the kind of stories that I will do again, if I
Should.
find something else that just lights my fire. It's like, let's
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
And we're not going to stop doing those.
I'm
I
glad.
think it's more of the things that require weekly
Mhm.
feeding
Yeah.
the monster,
Yeah.
right?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, but those other stories, oh yeah, as soon as I hear anything like that, and I will be looking for them, when they come up, I'll be breaking out the equipment and throwing on the headset, and it'll show up, and people will go, "Oh, he's alive,
He's still there.
still there." Yes.
That's
Well,
fabulous.
Scott, going back to your theme song, and then also on your show, there's this woman that comes on and says, "Well, we never talked about that," or "I didn't know about that." Was that a real person, or is that?
That's a great
That's
question.
him pushing a button.
Yeah, I've always wanted to ask you if that was a real person saying that.
Yeah, that's a real person saying that.
Oh.
That was my radio partner.
I love her. I love that.
Yeah.
Bernice.
Yeah.
Well, she's a great. I was known in Salt Lake City for a show called Fisher and Todd,
Yes.
Kissin' 97.
Yep. I
for
know
six-
that show. I
six-
used to live in Orban Provo. I heard
Okay,
that
so
show.
16
Oh,
years. Yeah. And that was what I was best known for.
yeah.
And we had a lot of fun, and we were on television a lot. And then after that show ended, I went on to a couple of other stations and took on new partners. And her name was Laura Bador, and she was one of the other partners that I had. And she's still a very dear friend of mine, and she's a theater person, very much into that. So when I went to put the theme together, I wanted some little drop lines in there that were just kind of fun and naughty.
Yes.
That
Extreme
suggested that this
genes.
is not going to be, an NPR
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
This is going to be Fisher and Todd doing genealogy.
There you
right?
go.
And so I said, I need you to record some lines for me. So she came in the studio and she dropped those. Yeah,
That's great.
those dates don't match the dates in the Bible. Things like that. So we would sit there and we'd write, we'd just think of some lines that we could write that we could drop into that theme that would kind of, establish the fun that we were trying to.
My favorite though is when she says, "Well, we just never talked about that."
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mother never told us about that.
Yeah.
Mother never told us about that.
I love it because I have had family members tell me that what they say is they say we just don't talk about that.
Yeah.
When you start asking them about stuff, you're just like, we don't talk about that.
I hope they were all things that everybody has heard or related to, and we're just kind of throwing them back at them and going, yeah, we know the world, we're part of that world with you. There's kind of a reflection of that. So,
well, before we go, I wanted to ask a question about being a genealogist. We are all genealogists, and all of us, if we were to be asked, would tell you there is a holy grail out there that we've been looking for since we started doing genealogy. So what is your brick wall, your challenge, your holy grail?
Great question.
What is it that you are been looking for however many years?
Second great grandfather, Arthur George Waldron, born 1800, died 1866, born in England, married Anne Elizabeth Stocks, born 1802, in the London area. I don't think it's his real name, Waldron.
Oh, wow.
Can't find it anywhere but in New York. I found one record of him where he took out, where they were doing the, what was it? They post for 3 weeks your marriage intentions.
Oh yes, the marriage bands.
The bands. And so that was in London, and somebody found that for me, which was the only record we've ever found of that couple in England. The kids were not christened over there, even though at least 5 or 6 of them were born over there.
Wow.
He's just a mystery.
But is his last name, is that one word? Or could it be 2 words? It's
like Waldron with an EA before the ON. He threw it in there. But, he was in theater. He was a stage carpenter. His son was also one, and he created an elevator stage in the 1880s in the Gilded Age in New York.
Wow.
And so the stage would go up above the one that's operating, and they would change the set. They'd close the curtains down here, and then they'd lower that one.
Oh,
now the other one's down beneath, and he developed the mechanisms for that. The president of the United States came to see it when he was in town, So and he named my great grandfather Anncestor, which is a name from Jason and the Argonauts. Plato wrote it.
Oh, yeah.
So he was well read.
Yeah.
He was interested in theater, and he was a bird stuffer, according to the directories. He just was, the mad professor. So I think he made the name up, and I can't even get DNA to help me out.
You can't go dig him up?
I could get the DeWitts to help me out.
There you go.
He's got what, 8 times the Waldron DNA.
Don't give him ideas. Well, other people got away with it.
But I did find a Holy Grail once, an earlier one that took me 30 years to find. And those are, and I bet you all of you have.
We all have them.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find a picture of my great grandfather. And when digitized newspapers came out, which do not get the glory they deserve,
this is true.
To go with DNA, those two, to me, they're the best things that have ever been invented. But I found out he had been a New York City volunteer fireman in the 1850s and 60s. And so I was able to track a lot of stuff on him in that area, and learned that the Veteran Firemen's Association, which was made up of the old volunteers pre-1865 in New York, decided to take a trip from New York to San Francisco, and by train, and they were going to stop in every major city along the way and parade with the volunteers, the old volunteers from those towns.
Neat.
And so now with the newspapers out around 2008, 9, somewhere in there, 10, they were getting pretty good. I decided to take the trip with them virtually and get every story in every place I I could find, everything about it. And one of the things I learned is they stopped in Salt Lake City, where I lived. He actually marched right past my mother's grandfather's tailor shop.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
He was from Norway. So my Norwegian great-grandfather was passed by my New York great-grandfather on the way to San Francisco.
Wow.
Again, insane, right?
Yeah.
Well, the newspaper story came out that he had written to a guy who owned a bar in Salt Lake, thanking him for the hospitality. By the way, my great-grandfather did die of cirrhosis of the liver, so I'm sure it was great hospitality. And the article in the paper talked about how he had sent a full body photo of himself, and I had no pictures. I had traced down every descendant that I knew of, and nobody had any photographs. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who's deep in the weeds in this stuff, shared that with him, and he went to work, and he went down to the state archives for Utah, and he found a photo of a New York fireman among some things there. He says, "Could this be your guy?" And I said, "How would I know? It's not marked. I don't know what he looked like."
Yeah.
But we discovered that they would put their initials in their helmet. And so he was the only AJF or AF in the group. So I said, if we could find that picture, then we would know. And he said, well, that's all they have there, but they said you should go up to this place. It's called This Is the Place Heritage Park. It's up on the east side of Salt Lake City. It's where the Mormon pioneers came in. And up there, they have a big statues and things, but they also recreated the old Salt Lake City from the 19th century with, an old hotel and an observatory. Have you ever been up there, Cheri?
I have.
Yeah, it's pretty
so
cool.
Yeah.
Way up tucked in the back is the old Fireman's Hall.
Yeah.
They recreated.
Wow.
And so I went up there, and these people said, "Yeah, we'll take you in." So we went in there, and they said, "But we don't have any folders. This isn't a research center." It was just stuff. And they had old pumpers, right? 50s, and they had fire hoses. And then we went up the stairs, and at the top of the stairs, there's this big picture of the Philadelphia firemen who had come through in the 1890s. Then we went in, and there were helmets, and then there was the Baltimore Fire Department, and then in the corner, well, there's the New York City firefighters. Look at that. Now, I knew that this picture existed, and I'd called the New York Fire Museum. They said, "Yeah, we got the picture, but we don't know who any of them are." So I'm looking at that going, look, that's a great picture. Which one? I'm looking at my great-grandfather right now, and I don't know who he is. This is terrible. And there's this little photographs of them all in a line, holding a rope, pulling a pumper, and the background was like an artistic rendering of Union Square in New York. And then I looked down at the bottom to see who the photographer was, and then along the bottom is this long strip of cardstock with numbers on it. And next to each number was a name. And I looked back up, and I saw that on their shoulder in white ink is a tiny little number. And I found my great-grandfather's name, my New York City great-grandfather, hanging on a wall in a building on a windswept hillside in Salt Lake City, Utah.
It's awesome.
Never give up.
What a
Never
story.
give up and go everywhere
Never.
and look. Look everywhere.
Well, and here's the thing. There was an antique store in Massachusetts advertising online that they were selling on consignment another group picture of these guys from 1885 when they had attended the swearing in of Grover Cleveland. It was the first big thing they had done. And I had reached out to them previously. They didn't have a key. They were going to ask the owner if they could open the back, see if a key was stuck in the back. I reached out and said, "Don't bother with that. Here's a picture of him. We got a close-up, sent it to them." And they took their catalog photographer and took his picture right out of that one and sent it back. Now I had two pictures.
Wow.
I love it.
And then
wait, there's more.
When my grandfather was 58 years old, he fathered a child with a 26-year-old. That was in 1891. She was the grandmother of this guy I tracked down in Connecticut. We've become good friends. He was down in his cellar one day, and what did he find? He found this guy.
Oh, wow.
And he knew who he was because he was the same guy in the fireman pictures.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Wow.
3.
I'm not that lucky.
And then the people at the display up in Salt Lake allowed me to borrow it and take it down to a photo place, and they allowed me to take a full high quality digital photo of it. I have it in full size,
Nice.
just in the hall. It's insane.
Wonderful.
So I call it my moose head.
Your moose head, yeah.
Yeah, because every hunter
Yes.
Right.
has something
I
that they've
love
always
that.
wanted to get and
Yes.
display
Yeah.
proudly.
Yep.
And and everybody asks about it when they see it in the hall. What is
sure.
this? I
Yeah.
said, well, let me tell you.
That's wonderful. You know, and
Fantastic.
people forget to look in places like that.
They
Yeah.
You know,
don't
for
look. They
things that are
forget to look
on-
anywhere. They think it's all
Yeah.
online on this computer.
Exactly. You have to
Mhm.
go and look and see what
Do
pictures.
you want
are
to see it?
involved.
Do you want to see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Don't,
Okay.
don't go anywhere.
We
Don't go
won't.
anywhere.
We're on Zoom. We're
We're not going
well, wait,
anywhere.
I could go away in my mountains.
There you go. There you go. Here he comes.
Here it comes.
Oh my goodness.
Oh
Oh,
my
wow.
God.
Wow, it is big.
Wow.
Oh, wow, look at
that's
that.
I don't
awesome.
know. Can we?
Oh, we can see
There
it.
it is.
That is
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah.
You
That's
did good.
amazing.
This is
Yeah.
like
Wow.
the greatest thing I've ever found.
I bet.
Oh,
You
Wow.
did good.
Yeah.
And
Pretty good.
you've given me hope for finding things that I'm looking for. Laura,
Oh,
did you
my
have a
And
question?
that's such a good lesson about looking at all the details in a photo.
Yes.
Go and really examine it, look at all the details. You never know what you're going to find in the details.
You really don't. It was one of the great thrills of my life.
I
you know?
bet. We're
You
all
gotta be
thrilled for you. So I can imagine.
I'm
Yeah.
excited.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I'm not from here. I'm from the
Yeah.
East. He was
Yeah.
from the East. And
Yeah.
we found him on a wall at where I live.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That-
It didn't make any sense.
It's
Yep.
yeah, he wanted to be found. It's that
That's right.
genealogy serendipity. He made sure
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
that photo
Mhm.
got there so you could find him. Yep.
I think the association sent copies of this to the various associations they
Yeah.
visited along their trip.
Yep. Nope. I
And,
like my story better. He wanted that picture to be found, so he made sure it got there
Yeah.
so you could find it.
I think
was-
I'm gonna
yeah, it
have
was-
to
What-
I've got a picture of 2 men with their wives, and one of them is the great grandfather. We don't know which one it is. So far, none of the family that I'm dealing with, that's a great grand uncle, or they're not sure either because they wasn't alive. But I think I'm gonna
We'll
start
put him in a
throwing-
museum somewhere and say,
Yeah.
somebody will come say, that's my ancestor.
Yeah, I don't even know the date of it. Well, yeah, I probably do, but yeah, I've got 2
That's
men,
amazing.
and I know it's in Tennessee or DC, so
That's
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
I'm gonna just
You
start
can do
posting
it,
it out
you
there.
just have to hang with it. So, when you ask what's the Holy Grail, I really already got it.
Yeah,
I really wanted that. Obviously, I still want to find Waldrian, but it might be left for somebody else.
Maybe.
that's
Maybe.
true.
Yeah, who knows? Melissa, I loved that question. We're gonna have to start
Great
asking.
question.
We'll
Yeah.
let
Mhm.
you start asking. That'll be Melissa's signature question
Oh,
from
Yeah,
now
yeah.
on. She'll have to ask that. Well, does anybody else have any questions?
This has been great.
It's
We
been
have
so
talked to you for
great.
an hour. So much fun but I am so grateful to hear that although you're retiring, you're still going
They're
to
gonna be around.
Oh yeah.
still be
I'm
around.
not-
and-
it's not
Keep his
goodbye. It's
fingers in
just
the
so
pie.
long.
Yeah, still got his fingers in the pie. And
Yeah.
most of us, Melissa will be there virtually, but most of us, I think, will be at Rootstack and we will see you there.
Yeah.
So,
I'm planning to.
yeah,
Good.
Yeah, it's going to be great fun.
that'll be fun. That'll be fun. We'll pull Melissa up on one of our phones and we'll
That'll
have
be
her
fun.
involved in the conversation too. That's what we'll do. Thank you for coming and talking to
Thank
us.
Oh,
you.
it's been a joy.
Thank you for all
asking me.
thank you for all the years.
Yes.
Just the entertainment and the learning and just teaching us things and bringing us the stories and the tips and all the fun and helping people understand that family history can be fun, that it isn't
Yes.
little old ladies with their little shawls and sweaters.
And dry facts. It's the
And dry
stories. It's the
facts.
stories.
Mhm.
Oh, it is the stories. I
Exactly.
started I started researching when I was 26, right after I got married, and we were planning on having kids. And it's like, oh man, I'd lost my dad, I'd lost two uncles, I'd lost a brother. All my grandparents were gone by the time I was 21. So it was like, I'm going to start now. And we would go and interview people. But every time I'd go to a library or something, they're like, what are you doing here?
Right.
Exactly. Well, thank you for coming, and again, thank you for all the many years and the many episodes and everything that you've done to entertain, to teach, to get people addicted, to suck people in, you know?
That's the plan. I hope they're
Yeah.
hooked.
Oh
I hope
yeah.
Look,
Oh
in a
yeah.
good
Oh
way.
yeah. Oh yeah. In a good way. And it was a good way to get younger people in too. So we're always looking for ways to do that. So we are grateful for you. We're grateful to have you join us tonight. We appreciate you being here with us. And you're welcome to jump back on anytime you want. If you find a good
Hey,
story, let
yeah.
us know.
So if you want to talk about, yeah, give me a jingle.
All
You
righty.
know where I am.
Okay, we know how to find you. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time on Gen Friends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
bye-bye.